Everyone knows about the ozone holes in Earth's atmosphere. For some reason, large-scale destruction of this ultraviolet protecting gas occurs in the polar regions, with the biggest hole opening up over Antarctica. The scientific consensus is that this process is linked to the release of ozone-depleting gases. But let's remember what kinds of industries are located in Antarctica. None, and there are no winds that carry air masses from densely populated continental areas there either. Our fellow scientist Vladimir Sivorotkin finds the causes of ozone layer breaches elsewhere. In particular, he believes that hydrogen is to blame, as it is the main gas released during Earth's degassing through faults and mountainous areas, which leads to the destruction of the ozone layer. Not because cows fart or people use Freon in refrigerators, but because the Earth constantly generates hydrogen deep underground in amounts that are incomparable to the activities of human civilization. Subtitle editor. However, in Antarctica, this is not the only hole in the Earth's shell. There is also a hole in the Earth's magnetosphere. The main breach in this protective shell, shielding us from solar and space radiation, is in the South Atlantic, southern hemisphere. This is the so-called South Atlantic magnetic anomaly. What do we know about it? Let's start with some background. In 2009, an Airbus A330 airliner operated by Air France on Flight 444 from Rio de Janeiro to Paris crashed over the waters of the Atlantic Ocean 3 hours and 45 minutes after departing from the Brazilian capital. The Commission's conclusions. According to the flight recorders, incorrect airspeed readings caused the autopilot to disengage, but the reason why the pilots lost control of the aircraft remains a mystery. The pilots understood that the plane was descending rapidly, but they didn't know which instruments they could trust. It might have seemed to them that all the instrument readings were incorrect, so what caused the instruments to malfunction, many of which are duplicated in the complex systems of such aircraft? This remained a mystery to the investigators. Protons in some areas of Earth travel closer to the surface than elsewhere. This area was exactly where the search for Air France 447 had recently taken place. Further measurements and observations confirmed that the magnetic field intensity here is lower than what is recorded in other parts of our planet. This magnetic anomaly turned out to be quite large, stretching from southern Africa along the entire South Atlantic and covering all of South America. And the lowest intensity occurs over the south of South America, and this area is called the Brazilian Magnetic Anomaly or Brazilian Magnetic Anomaly. The approximate area of the anomaly is almost 8 million square kilometers. It became clear that this area is at least a threat to the operation of satellites, and possibly the radiation flux can also disrupt the operation of instruments on airplanes. The Van Allen radiation belts have an upper belt at 1,200–1,300 km altitude and a lower belt at 600–700 km. But in addition to this area in the South Atlantic magnetic anomaly, here the radiation belt descends to an altitude of only 200 kilometers above the Earth's surface. And in this area, the strength of the magnetic field at sea level is the same as it is at an altitude of about 1,000 kilometers outside the anomaly, and this area resembles a dent in the Earth's magnetic field. It turns out that this magnetic anomaly leads to increased radiation levels in orbit, where spacecraft are also located, and it affects the operation of satellites. It turns out that officially the International Space Station orbit also passes over this area, but apparently the orbit is constantly being adjusted, and in different years the International Space Station orbits have different positions relative to the surface. For example, in 2019 and in 2024 the orbit passed over the Earth. It turns out that when the International Space Station orbit passes over the south of South America, the station enters the South Atlantic Magnetic Anomaly Zone, and both cosmonauts and astronauts have to receive an increased dose of radiation. No one comments on this fact because no one has compared this data. There is only a brief mention that all spacecraft suspend their operations when flying over this anomaly, but it's impossible to stop the equipment on the International Space Station. There are people on it. And yet no one has ever complained about receiving an increased dose of radiation, no one's hair has fallen out, and no one has lost their potency. Cosmonauts generally behave as if they are not in space at all, but that's a completely different story. Subtitles. Another interesting fact is that the Hubble Space Telescope does not conduct observations when passing through this anomaly. It is believed that passing through the South Atlantic anomaly was the cause of the global star satellite network failures in 2007. In October 2012, the SpaceX spacecraft docked to the International Space Station experienced a temporary problem while passing through the anomaly. National Aeronautics and Space Administration is aware of it and displays it on the screen. In the Mission Control Center in Houston, this area is marked on the map. So, what are the reasons for the appearance of this magnetic hole? There is information about measurements conducted by researchers and ships around the world. They have found that over the past 150 years, the strength of the magnetic field has decreased by 10. Something is definitely happening with the Earth's dynamo. If this trend continues, it will take 1,500 years for the magnetic field to disappear completely. And now this can explain why auroras can now be observed during magnetic storms in mid-latitudes and even further south, and they are no longer just polar at this time. It turns out that in the south of South America, residents should see auroras in the sky every clear night, but there doesn't seem to be any news about this. Either this magnetic hole isn't as scary as scientists say, although they don't forget to show frightening graphs. The size of the anomaly keeps growing and its area is drifting westward. It is thought that the drift speed nearly matches the difference in rotation between the Earth's core and surface, estimated at 0.3 to 0.5 degrees per year. Subtitles yet. The North Magnetic Pole has shifted 1,100 kilometers toward Eurasia, over 100 years of observation. In 1970, the North Magnetic Pole was moving at a speed of 10 kilometers per year, and now it is moving 4 times faster. There are concerns that a magnetic field reversal is brewing, and the poles are preparing to switch places. Scientists say this occurs every 100,000 to 200,000 years, with the last reversal 780,000 years ago. This is the Brunhes-Matuyama reversal, and the next one is already approaching and is very much overdue. According to more modern researchers, various catastrophic processes happened literally every 100 years. Either a flood, a pole shift, a drop to 100, some phenomenon occurring, a global cooling, and then another flood. A continuous series of disasters. If we accept the version that all of them were man-made, then 200 years of relatively peaceful life tells us that the period of civilization transformation is over. And there is no longer, or at least currently no, need for such global resets.